Hey everyone, today we're going to be going over how to replace a wheel speed sensor in Hyundai vehicles. This is a 2010 Santa Fe. As you'll see there, I'm using a breaker bar with a 13/16 deep socket to remove the wheel lug nuts. Of course, you're going to raise your vehicle after loosening the lug nuts on your pinch weld there, and then go ahead and pop your wheel off. This will give you access to the brake rotor, caliper, and everything that you need to do this job. So with the wheel speed sensors, when they go bad, they will cause your traction light and ABS light to pop, code C1206, C1209, and sometimes they will cause a rough shifting. So once you have the wheel off, you're going to need to remove the caliper. It's just 2 bolts. You're going to need a 9/16 wrench or socket. Loosen those bolts there, and then just pull the caliper straight off. You're going to want to pull to your right, set it somewhere safe. Afterwards, you'll have these 2 screws here. These simply just hold the brake rotor in place. You're going to want to go ahead and loosen and then remove these 2 screws. Once you have everything else loosened, it will allow you to pop everything off. Afterwards, you're going to need to disconnect this sensor connector or wiring harness. Just a clip right here, as you can see the flathead pushing against. You can pull straight back with your finger, or you can use a small screwdriver like I did. Just pop straight off. Make sure you save that in a safe spot because you're going to need to reuse it. Afterwards, when you remove this wire connector, you will get access to these 4 bolts here. This is what holds your wheel bearing / hub and ultimately your wheel speed sensor in place. You're going to use a 14mm socket to remove all 4 bolts. I went ahead and used a shallow socket with my torque wrench here, simply because it gives you quite a bit of leverage and you can fit it in there to remove all 4 bolts without having to do any crazy maneuvering. These bolts are very tight, so you're going to need something with quite a bit of leverage once again. And then afterwards, when you're removing the last bolts, everything will be loose. So the entirety of the brake rotor, the brake dust shield, and the wheel hub / bearing, and of course sensor will all pop straight off. You just pull towards you. And then from here, it kind of layers, so you can pull the dust cover off and then pop your wheel hub / bearing / speed sensor out of there. Don't be scared, it goes back together pretty easy. So once you have this removed, you will then be able to remove the wheel speed sensor itself. Make sure you take a picture of the system here to make sure that your wheel speed sensor is in the exact same spot. Main reason is your connector there has to go back in the same spot or else it won't connect properly. So once again, take a picture of it, make sure everything goes back in the same place as far as the sensor goes. And then as you can see here, I'm just kind of lightly tapping it with a hammer / flathead, and it'll pop straight off.
Great.
As I removed it, I noticed there's some lubrication on there. I went ahead and transferred it to the new sensor.
Lubrication.
Of course, make sure that these sensors are the same size. And with that being said, I went ahead and linked below the sensor itself. It's only $15, super cheap. I also linked all of the necessary tools that you will need for the job. Just go ahead and check that out. Make sure that you're not missing anything if you've already got tools. And then, of course, after adding the lubrication to the new sensor, we're going to go ahead and reinstall it.
Like so.
Once again, triple check that it's going in the exact same position as the old one came off. That way, when you go to put the wheel hub assembly back on with the new sensor, it bolts up in the right location. So once you have everything kind of lined up, take a 2x4, something flat. That way you disperse the pressure and just kind of lightly tap the sensor back into the wheel bearing there. Just make sure you don't hit it straight up with a hammer. You're probably going to crack something. Once again, use something that will disperse the pressure like a 2x4. And you'll have to hit it quite a few times. You'll likely have to adjust things, whether it's the wheel bearing itself or the sensor.
Totally smacked the shit out of it. Gave it a decent
potentially the 2x4 as well. As you can see, I kind of had to use the bottom end of it there to make sure that everything fit perfectly.
That side just barely out. Alright.
So after tapping away on that thing for a little while, it's going to eventually sit flush inside of the wheel bearing there. So once you get everything just how you like it, just triple check it, make sure there's no big seams and everything is flush. And then from there, you're going to be able to put everything back together exactly how you took it off. What I decided to do was go ahead and put 2 bolts in there, just kind of line everything up but what you're going to want to do is put the wheel bearing back into the rotor first after checking that these two holes there line up with the rotor. Remember those screws we took off? You got to make sure that lines up so those screws go back in there. I put 2 bolts in to make sure that it was easy to put the entire geberit back on. Did not end up recording that, but long story short, you put the bearing back into the rotor and then the rotor and bearing onto the dust shield there, and everything bolts up quite nicely. Once again, exactly how you took it off. Make sure that your sensor is on the bottom, exactly how it was when you took it off here. So sensor below the little spring cable there. That way when you go to plug it back in, just like it was earlier, it's on the bottom instead of the top, so everything goes back together nicely. Go ahead and put those 4 bolts back in, torque them down to about 80 foot-pounds. Put your wheel back on after putting your caliper back on at about 25 foot-pounds. Torque everything down after lowering the car, and you will be good to go. Sorry I did not record the end bits there. If you need any other help or have any questions, go ahead and comment below.